My son was in the backyard storage unit. 102 degrees Fahrenheit fever. Leftover rice on a paper plate. His bedroom? A freshly decorated playroom for my sister's daughter. My own mother looked at me, completely unfazed, and said, "Your sister needed the space. Your son is fine." I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just looked at my shivering boy, opened my banking app, and pressed one single button. My mom's phone buzzed in her pocket, and the second she looked at the screen, her face went completely white. She looked up at me, trembling, and choked out, "What did you just do?" I smiled, picked up my son's thin mattress, and replied, "Exactly what you told me to do. I looked after my family." They thought they could use my love to drain my bank account while treating my child like an unwanted secret. They were about to find out exactly how much that one button cost them. Hello everyone, my name is Lauren, and to understand how my own blood turned on my son the second my back was turned, we have to look back at the agreement that started it all. I had spent the last 5 years building my career from scratch as a data consultant, working 80-hour weeks for one single purpose: to give my 7-year-old son, Leo, the life he deserved. Being a single mother meant making impossible sacrifices. So, when a prestigious firm offered me an intensive, 6-month out-of-state contract that could financially secure our future, I knew I had to take it. But I couldn't leave Leo with just anyone. I turned to my parents, believing their home would be the safest, most loving environment for him. To ensure he wasn't a burden, we made a strict legal and financial agreement. I would send my parents exactly $5,000 every single month. That money was explicitly earmarked to cover Leo's private tutoring, premium organic groceries, enrollment in his favorite sports clubs, and a generous compensation for my parents' time. My mother wept tears of gratitude when I showed her the first transfer, promising me that Leo's routine wouldn't change by a single fraction. I trusted her completely. I also assumed the extra financial cushion would ease the tension in that house, considering my younger sister, Chloe, lived there rent-free with her 5-year-old daughter, Ava. Chloe had a habit of drifting from job to job, perpetually relying on our parents to bail her out of credit card crises. With $5,000 flowing into the household monthly, I left for my contract with a peaceful mind, confident that my financial sacrifice was protecting my son. I had no idea I was just funding their greed. The grueling hours paid off, and through sheer determination, I managed to wrap up the entire consulting project 3 months ahead of schedule. The corporate executives were thrilled, and my bank account was padded with an early completion bonus. All I could think about on the long drive back to Sacramento was holding Leo in my arms. I deliberately chose not to call ahead. I wanted to surprise him, picturing his face lighting up when he saw the back seat of my car piled high with the new building blocks and comic books I'd bought for him. As I turned down my parents' familiar, tree-lined street and pulled into the circular driveway, a strange knot tied itself in my stomach. The house looked different. The old, weathered patio furniture my parents had owned for a decade was gone, replaced by a sleek, ultra-modern outdoor dining set that easily cost thousands. But what truly made me stop and stare was the vehicle parked under the carport. It was a brand new, metallic blue luxury SUV. I knew my parents lived strictly on a fixed pension, and Chloe's vague freelancing gigs barely covered her daily coffees. Yet, here was a luxury vehicle glinting in the afternoon sun. I tried to dismiss the rising panic, telling myself that perhaps my father had made a lucky investment or Chloe had finally landed a stable corporate job. I grabbed Leo's gifts from the passenger seat, my heart hammering against my ribs, and walked up to the front door. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, expecting the usual chaotic warmth of my childhood home. Instead, the house was eerily silent. I dropped my keys on the console table and headed straight for the hallway toward Leo's bedroom, eager to see his face. But when I pushed the door open, my breath caught in my throat. Leo's race-car bed, his bookshelf, and his framed drawings were completely gone. The room had been transformed into a lavish, pastel pink paradise. A massive custom dollhouse dominated the corner, and my niece, Ava, was fast asleep in a brand new canopy bed. Before I could even process what I was looking at, a sharp gasp came from behind me. I turned to see my mother standing in the doorway, clutching a designer handbag I had never seen before. Her face flashed with momentary panic before she instantly forced a tight, artificial smile. "Lauren, you're early. You should have called us," she stammered, her voice pitched an octave too high. She immediately stepped forward, grabbing my arm and trying to physically guide me back toward the kitchen. "Come, let's leave Ava to sleep. Let me make you some tea in the kitchen, and we can talk." Her desperation to keep me away from the hallway made my blood run cold. Just as I opened my mouth to demand where my son was, a faint, wet cough echoed through the house. It wasn't coming from upstairs. It was coming from outside through the open kitchen window. I tore myself away from my mother's grip and sprinted through the back door, following that awful, hollow sound. In the far corner of the yard stood the old detached metal storage unit, a place my father used to keep rusty lawnmowers and broken tools. I threw the heavy latch open, and the sight inside fractured my soul. There was my 7-year-old boy, curled up on a thin, stained cot, shivering violently beneath a single threadbare blanket. The air inside the windowless tin shed was stifling and smelled of rust. Next to him, on a flimsy paper plate, sat a crusty clump of cold, leftover white rice. I rushed to him, pulling his small body into my arms. His skin was radiating an intense heat. He was burning up with a severe 102 degrees Fahrenheit fever. "Mommy," he whispered, his eyes glazed and bloodshot as he clung to my jacket. I tried to be good. Behind me, my mother and Chloe walked out into the yard, completely casual, holding iced coffees. Chloe crossed her arms, rolling her eyes as if I were staging a theatrical performance. "Oh, stop exaggerating, Lauren," she scoffed. We insulated the shed and put a space heater in there. Ava was outgrowing her old room, and she desperately needed a proper creative playroom for her developmental growth. "Leo is perfectly fine out here." My mother nodded in agreement, unfazed. "Your sister needed the space, Lauren. Family has to accommodate family. You're making a scene over nothing." I didn't argue with them. I didn't waste a single breath screaming or crying, because looking at my shivering boy, I realized that words were entirely useless against monsters. My silence seemed to embolden Chloe, who took a smug sip of her coffee, completely confident that I would just accept their twisted logic. Instead, I carefully lifted Leo into my arms, resting his burning forehead against my shoulder, and reached into my pocket to pull out my phone. Before leaving for my contract, I had set up a joint checking account explicitly for Leo's expenses, making my parents authorized users, and I had also absorbed their entire household under my premium family health insurance plan. They thought my generosity was a permanent right. With my thumb hovering over the screen, I opened my banking app. First, I initiated an immediate reversal of the pending $5,000 transfer scheduled to hit my mother's account for the upcoming month. Next, I wiped out the authorized user access, instantly freezing the secondary cards my mother and sister had been using to fund their new lifestyle. Finally, with one deliberate press of a button, I logged into my insurance portal and completely terminated the health coverage for my parents and Chloe, effective immediately. The exact second the confirmation screen flashed green, my mother's phone buzzed aggressively in her designer handbag. She pulled it out, her eyes scanning the banking alerts, and the smug expression on her face instantly dissolved into sheer terror. My mother gasped, dropping her iced coffee onto the grass as her face drained of all color. "What did you just do?" she choked out, her hands trembling violently as she stared at the screen. Chloe's phone buzzed next, and she let out a piercing shriek. "Lauren, my auto draft for the SUV just declined. The account is frozen." I kept walking right past them toward my car, cradling Leo tightly against my chest. "I did exactly what you taught me to do," I said, my voice dead and cold. "I looked after my family, and since you've proven that my son isn't part of yours, you don't get to touch another dime of my money." Panic completely replaced their arrogance. My mother ran after me, grabbing at my sleeve, her voice twisting into desperate crocodile tears. "Lauren, please. We have bills. Your father's medication, the mortgage. You can't just cut us off." We did what was best for the household. Chloe was right behind her, screaming about family solidarity and how I was ruining her life over a temporary living arrangement. They kept throwing out excuses, gaslighting me, trying to make me feel guilty for leaving them financially stranded. I ignored their voices, opening the back door of my car and gently securing Leo into a seat. I didn't care if they couldn't afford their luxury cars or their lifestyle anymore. I put the car in drive and